Well, the problem is I think we're in a golden age of television and we're about to enter the playoffs. And so that's going to consume a lot of time to watch all the exciting games that actually matter that are happening now. But, Apple TV's on a roll. They've got the studio out, which I've watched the first 3-4 episodes, which is great. I started watching the new John Hamm show, Your Friends and Neighbors. It's great. So, Brandon, if you had to prioritize something to watch, because you had limited time because of the playoffs, what are you picking?
Okay, now this is a great question because I also watched that new John Hamm show. I like it a lot so far. There's also a new Seth Rogen show called The Studio, which is a lot of fun. He takes over like a movie studio, and there's all these like great cameos from Hollywood stars. But I'm gonna go back to The Residents. I like it so much. I would still highly recommend The Residents over all the. I've been watching everything. The Last of Us came back, first episode for that, and that's a great show. But The Residents is my favorite. Kind of that and Paradise of like the recent shows of the past few months. Those would be my two priorities.
Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you in these last few days before playoff basketball?
I am doing well. I am itching to watch some playoff basketball. The plans are a nice appetizer. I'm enjoying them. I wish the games were a little bit closer and better. They've all been blowouts besides that Warriors game, but I am mostly ready to see who the Thunder are going to play in the first round. It's down to the Mavs and the Grizz.
Yeah, that's right. Well, on the show today, we're going to briefly touch on those last 3 games of the regular season. We're going to check in on where the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year race stands today. We'll start breaking down the potential playoff first-round matchups for the Thunder and look at the larger playoff world, and we'll take some listener questions as we head into playoff season. But let's start with those last 3 games. They were all wins. SGA, Dort, Case and Wallace, Hart, they didn't play in any of those games. J-Dub and Chet only played in the game last Wednesday against Phoenix. What were your takeaways from really these last 3 meaningless games?
My takeaways are that the Suns were really bad, even though they tried to be really good this season. And that the Jazz and Pelicans really, really, really want Cooper Flagg. And that the Thunder's second, third, and fourth string players are really good for second, third, and fourth string players. Like all those guys can truly play. Like, obviously organizations can try to tank, but the players that were out there for the Pelicans and for the Jazz and for the Suns, even though they weren't trying to tank, are trying to win. They're trying to win those games. And, the Thunder backups, you got to give them kudos and credit because they're going up against teams and players and they're winning. Like to see Jay Will and Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and all these guys go off in these games, these real NBA games, regardless of what the teams are doing, in the lottery standings. I think it's really impressive.
Yeah, and really, some of those games were fun to watch. The Jazz game in particular was a lot of fun because you saw Wiggins score 35, Joe score 32. He made, I think it was a career high, 10 3-pointers. He was absolutely on fire. Jay Will had another triple-double with 15 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists. And Adam Flagler had his best game maybe of his career with 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and he shot 4 of 9 from 3. So, yeah, we didn't get meaningful basketball, but there was still some fun stuff to watch.
Yeah, and then guys like Brandon Carlson, who's on, a 2-way contract. He's not going to be able to play in the playoffs, but he finished this season with 26 points, close to double-digit rebounds and a few block shots and looked really impressive. So, like, a guy like him carries some momentum into next season, like whether that's as, continuing as a 2-way guy or maybe getting picked up on regular contract from the Thunder or another team. Like, so good to see those guys show out.
Well, and you brought up the Suns, and at the time the Thunder-Suns game tipped off, the Suns theoretically still had a chance to make the play-in. They were eliminated later in the middle of that game, but they had something at stake, and they started off well. But even without three starters, Oklahoma City ended up rolling away with that one. Where do you think the Suns rank among all-time disappointments?
Well, I don't know about all-time disappointments, but I would say they rank dead last, 30th in disappointments this season. When you have Kevin Durant, and given, he missed a large chunk of the season at the end, but you have KD healthy for a lot of the year, and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, and, guys that you thought were going to be solid reserve guys, or role players like Grayson Allen, and you can't even make in the play-in. A team like the Mavs, who lost everybody. They lost Luka, but then they lose Kyrie. Their bigs were injured for so much of the season. You can't even make the play-in, the number 10 spot, over a team like the Mavs. Uh, Absolutely dead last this season as far as disappointments go. And their future, man, they are stuck. They are in such a terrible place. Like, I just feel for Suns fans, because it's hard to see any sort of hope. You look at tanking teams like, okay, well, maybe they can get Cooper Flag, or maybe the young guys that they have, they're going to turn into stars. The Suns don't have any young guys that are going to turn into stars, and they don't have even a draft pick this season after the terrible season they had.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on the Suns because this is not a Suns podcast, but it does make you appreciate what Presti has done. And, I was debating with some others about this, the idea of, do you go all in? So you give yourself the best odds you can in one single year to win a championship, even if that means you're sacrificing the future. Are you willing to settle for maybe a little bit less so that you have multiple chances at that championship? And I think that's the philosophy that Presti has, right? Thunder could have traded a bunch of assets and gone all in this year. Of course, I'm not sure why they would when the team is so good, but theoretically, try to make a huge deadline deal to go find that missing quote piece or whatever, but sacrificing the future. Is it really worth it? Or would you rather have 2, 3, 4, 5 cracks at this with the team today?
Yeah, that's the thing. You always want more cracks at it, because anything can happen if you go all in for one season. Look at the Mavs. Even though we all agree that it was a terrible trade, the philosophy from their point of view was they were going all in to win a championship this season in this short window of 2 or 3 years. Well, look, that happens and you lose Kyrie for the rest of the season. Anything can happen, like, with injuries or health, or you make a playoff run, get a bad matchup, or the other team gets hot, you go cold. Like, one season variance to go all in and risk the future, it's just a bad philosophy, because anything can happen in such a short sample size of one season. Too much to go against the field for any one team.
Well, fortunately, the Thunder didn't have to leverage their future to go all in because they are so loaded. Part of that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is the MVP front runner. But how confident are you that he's going to take away that trophy?
I'm very confident. Now, I know that, like, on social media, there was kind of it seemed like a bit of momentum over the last few days from some national talking heads like Bill Simmons, kind of pushing the Jokic narrative. So it seemed like maybe this race would be a lot closer than we thought it would be. But there's a guy who tracks all the votes that have been made public, whether MVP voter says on Twitter who he voted for, or they announced on a podcast or on TV. And right now, the latest votes that are in, Shea has 16 and Jokic has 8 as of this recording. So, things are trending the right way for Shea. I think when you look at the betting odds, they were like 95% in favor of Shea. That's from Vegas. And now, from what I can tell, I'm not like a gambler or anything like that, but I think those have been taken away. Like, I think the bets are off now. Vegas has taken that bet down from what I see, which means it should be a wrap. I think that's what that means. I may sound like an idiot here, but that's what I picked up as far as the betting odds go. So I think Shea has this in the bag. Jokic, it's not going to be unanimous. Jokic is going to have his support. Seems like mostly from the ringer. But Shea should win this.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. And the defensive player of the year award. It seems like the campaign for Lou Dort is gaining a little bit of steam. The headliner of that campaign is Jalen Williams, J-Dub. And you get quite a wide variety of experts and analysts talking about that award. Some people aren't even including Lou Dort in their top three, and some are saying Dort should be the winner despite him, not being a big. What is your best argument for Dort winning, and how do you see the race playing out?
All right, so I've been a huge nerd about Defensive Player of the Year. I've spent more time than I'd like to admit, like tracking the history of the Defensive Player of the Year award. There's been 42 winners in the history of Defensive Player of the Year, and I tweeted this out. Every single one of those 42 winners either led their team to a top 5 defensive rating and or a top 3 seed and or finished number 1 or number 2 in blocks or steals. So that covers team defense, that's important for Defensive Player of the Year. It covers team record, how great was the team, and then it covers individual accomplishments and accolades and steals and blocks. So Draymond Green was the front runner. He does not qualify for any of these. Lou Dort, his team finished number 1 in defensive rating, and his team finished as the number 1 seed. And this was a historic defense. So if I was campaigning for Lou Dort, that would be my argument. And of all the Defensive Player of the Year candidates, nominees this season, Lou Dort and Amen Thompson are the only two that check off 2 of those 3 categories. And they check off the same categories, but Lou's team was number 1 in defensive rating, and Houston was number 5. And the Thunder were the number 1 seed, and Houston was the number 2 seed. So, I would favor Lou Dort just going by historical precedents to win the award. That would be my campaign.
Do you think he has a real shot?
Unfortunately, looking at that same MVP tracker, the votes that are coming in that have been made public so far, Lou at this point has 2 first place votes. And one of those was for Lug Dort, so hopefully that gets counted. Evan Mobley right now is the leader with 5 first place votes. So this one is pretty wide open. It doesn't look like Dort will finish as the winner based on the early trajectory. But like you said, he's kind of had a late momentum shift and some buzz from guys like Windhorst and Perkins talking about him. So hopefully, he picks up steam. I'd like to see him at least finish top 3, like be one of the 3 finalists that's announced this Sunday on TNT. I think that would be a really big win if he ends up being one of the 3 finalists. This thing is wide open. It really looks like Mobley is probably the favorite right now.
Well, you would like to see the Thunder take home some individual awards with the incredible season that the team just achieved, 68 wins, most wins in franchise history, one of the best seasons in NBA history, number 1 in margin of victory, number 1 in SRS. I mean, just an incredible year that is deserving of some of these guys getting individual accolades. Of course, SGA, chief among them for MVP. But now we're into the real part of being an NBA fan, and that is the playoffs. As you noted at the top, we don't know who the Thunder's opponent is going to be yet. That'll be determined Friday night, tomorrow, between Dallas and Memphis. Memphis early looked like they might get run out of the building against the Warriors, but then they came back. It was a really competitive game. Dallas, on the other hand, absolutely shellacked the Kings. That one was not competitive at all. But who is your pick to win tomorrow night?
This is tough. First of all, we don't even know if John Morant is going to be, 100% healthy. I'm sure he'll play. He had that sprained ankle. He missed some time of that Warriors game, came back and played late, and he looked good, quite honestly. But we all know, like in sports, you can get injured, sprain your ankle, but you have that adrenaline going and come back in the game, then it's more sore the next few days. So that's a factor. I think the Grizzlies are the better team and more well-rounded team, and they'll be at home. So I would favor the Grizzlies, but that said, it's a 1-game sample size. I think Anthony Davis is the best player on the court between the 2 teams, so they have the best player. And despite Kyrie being injured and not playing, and they don't have any guards, those 3 bigs For the Mavs, between Davis, Lively, and Gafford, that is a lot of size. Then you add PJ Washington. I would not be surprised whatsoever if the Mavs win this. I really have it as a coin toss, which is a credit, I think, to the Mavs, because this should easily be in the Grizzlies' favor when you look at the fact, the whole season and Kyrie's hurt and it's in Memphis.
Yeah, and I think you also got to account for the X factor that the Mavs have, and that is Klay Thompson. And I think one reason that Dallas ran away from the Kings was Klay had a really good game. You can't count on Klay to have a great game every night, but that's a difference maker if he's showing up and shooting 5 of 7 from 3, scoring 23 points, and is a plus 31 in the box score.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's such a huge X factor. He's not the Klay Thompson from 2016, but you see those flashes every once in a while, like we did just last night. So yeah, he absolutely any given night can go off and look like the old Klay Thompson instead of old Klay Thompson, and that's a huge X factor. A 1-game sample size, anything can happen, and Klay can still swing it.
Well, let's preview both potential matchups for the first round in Oklahoma City. So if it's Memphis, the Thunder swept Memphis this season. Really not any game was all that close. Memphis did fire their coach. And you'd say that Oklahoma City knew how to defend Ja and really defend Memphis really, really well. So otherwise, the Thunder really outclassed the Grizzlies every time they played. So how would you see a Memphis OKC series playing out?
Like you said, the Thunder swept them 4-0 this season. I think they would be a really tough team to sweep in a playoff series just because, any given game, Ja, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., that's a really nice big three. Shea easily will be the best player on the court in this series. Ja has been, up and down as far as his efficiency goes this season, and the Thunder have the perimeter defenders to give him fits and give him issues. Zach Edey, I think the Thunder can take advantage of that matchup. Obviously, he is huge. He gets, I think he was a factor in that Warriors game. His size was an issue for the Warriors, but the Thunder can take advantage of the fact that he can't guard at the perimeter. I think that you can, the Thunder can throw Chet and Hartenstein at Edey. The Warriors just aren't capable of that. So I think that they'll do a really good job in this matchup if it happens. Like, I look at all the potential issues that the Grizzlies could cause other teams, and I don't think that there'll be issues for the Thunder. I would take OKC in 5. That would be my prediction. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in the playoffs, you can have a team have a great night and take one. So it's not quite Pelicans level of competition for the Thunder this season in the first round. But if you look at the way that the season played out and the way that Oklahoma City matches up on paper with the Grizzlies, you'd feel pretty confident that the Thunder would advance out of the first round. Now, looking over to Dallas, that's an interesting matchup. The Mavs beat the Thunder 3 times this season, but the roster was different in every matchup with the trades, the injuries. The team that the Thunder would face in the first round is not a team that the Thunder had faced at all this season. So there's nothing on tape that we can look to and say, yeah, this is how we think this game's going to play out or this matchup's going to play out. So how would you see this one playing out?
Yeah, like you said, we can't look at this season's games at all. First of all, the Thunder didn't have either Chet nor Hartenstein in any of those losses. So they didn't have their bigs. Obviously, the Mavs didn't have Anthony Davis in any of that. So you just can't look at them. The Mavs are so interesting because obviously, PJ Washington turns into MJ Washington versus the Thunder. And you have all the size between Anthony Davis and Lively and Gafford, and they're healthy now. The problem is they just don't have the guards. We've mentioned Klay Thompson and how he can be an X factor. But like as far as creators, ball handlers, playmakers, guys to set Anthony Davis up, you got Spencer Dinwiddie and Dante Exum. And then on the other side, the Thunder have Lou Dort and Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace to throw at these guys. So that is a huge, huge issue for the Mavs. The Thunder should just outclass and out-talent them. But I do think that the length and the size and the defense of those Dallas bigs could cause some potential issues for any team, just because that's a lot of length. That's a lot of defense. It's going to make it harder to score at the rim, which the Thunder love to score at the rim. I would still take the Thunder in 5, though. I would say OKC in 5 in either one of these two matchups.
So you feel pretty confident, despite the fact that, as you noted, the Mavericks have a really impressive trio of bigs with Davis, Lively, and Gafford. They have that X factor in Klay Thompson. And on their roster, they have the greatest player to ever suit up against the Thunder. So should fans, though, be maybe a little bit worried?
I mean, I don't know if I would say worried. I would understand, the hesitancy to be excited because, on paper, the Mavs have been through the ringer this season between the Luka trade, the Kyrie injury, the fire Nico chance, anywhere they go, whether it's a Dallas home game or it's at medieval times or wherever location in Dallas they are, the fire Nico chance come out. The fans are upset. Fans are canceling their season tickets. And yet, on paper, they still have a talented team, and they have a team with a lot of size and length and defense still. But the Thunder the Thunder are just so much better than the Mavs, especially with no Kyrie. So I would not be worried. I think that if you lose to the Mavs without Kyrie after this season that the Mavs had, and all the issues and everything that's gone wrong, it was just meant to be. Like you're fighting against fate at that point because I can't see any reason to pick the Mavs in that series.
Well, the last question I have about this matchup, the first round matchup for the Thunder is who do you want to play? Not who do you think the Thunder match up the best against, but what matchup would you like to see?
So, the old theory of best player on the team is the harder matchup in the playoffs. And by that theory, I still think that Anthony Davis is a better player than Ja Morant. So in some ways, I can say that the Mavs would still be the tougher matchup even without Kyrie. I think the Grizzlies would be a more fun matchup because of the whole Ja, thing and what he brings and the excitement level between an SGA versus Ja matchup. I would say this though, probably Dallas because of last year. It would feel fitting after, the season that the Mavs had and the playoffs last year and the potential rivalry that was taken away from both fan bases to see Thunder versus Mavs after what we saw last season. So I would probably say the Mavs. Plus, if I end up going to away games in the playoffs, it'd be really, really nice to just be able to drive to Dallas, the 3-hour drive.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I guess I'd rather see a Mavs series because, to your point about last season, it would feel like the Thunder are slaying some demons. Not only because of the playoffs last season, but the fact that the Mavs got the best of the Thunder 3 times this season, in a season where the Thunder lost a total of 14 games. So maybe on paper, I would feel more confident if they match up against the Grizzlies. I would enjoy watching the Thunder beat the Mavs just a little bit more. But let's look ahead to potential second round matchups. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but they are the number 1 seed. It's going to be either Denver or the Clippers. Now, Denver fired their head coach, Mike Malone. They fired their GM. That organization is in turmoil, but they have Jokic and they have home court. So are they the favorites here or are the Clippers the favorites?
I think it's a toss up. Like when you look at, as far as like expert predictions and analysts and things like that, it seems like it's a toss up. I personally am leaning towards the Clippers. I think they're a more complete team. They have 4 real guys that have been so good this year between James Harden, Norman Powell, Zubac, and Kawhi Leonard. Looks like not quite, prime Kawhi Leonard, but he looks really, really good. He looks like 85% of prime Kawhi Leonard right now. He's healthy. So a healthy Kawhi Leonard that's playing this well. And then you surround those guys with some really, really good defensive players like Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. I actually like the Clippers in this matchup. I think that the Nuggets defense is a real issue. They haven't struggled this season because of offense. Like regardless of MVP narratives and all those things, and for some reason all the Nuggets players getting criticized for not being good enough. Offensively, those guys have been really, really good. And not just Jokic. They've all been pretty good offensively. The issue is defense. And I think the Clippers, between the scoring of Harden, Kawhi, and Norman Powell, can really score on the Nuggets. And I think the Nuggets will score to struggle against this really, really good Clippers defense.
Let's look at the other side of the bracket. Rockets Warriors to me is a really fun and interesting matchup. You've got that young upstart team in the Rockets, not too dissimilar maybe than last year's Thunder team. And they're facing up against a very experienced veteran Warriors team. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
I would say Amen Thompson is going to give Curry fits. And the Rockets, I think, are becoming a little bit underrated. For a number 2 seed, they've got to be like the biggest number 2 seed underdog of all time, right? Like nobody is picking the Rockets. And I'm not picking the Rockets either. I think the Warriors will win this. Curry and Butler, too much playoff experience, too good. They'll be the 2 best players on the court. No disrespect to the Rockets. Like Şengün is great and Jalen Green. And I think the Rockets have a better defense. I think they have more depth. And they've got a great future. But I like the Warriors in this matchup.
And then Lakers-Wolves. I feel pretty confident to say that the Lakers are going to be the odds-on favorite to advance out of that series. Do the Wolves stand a chance?
I think they stand a chance. They're the more complete team. They're the deeper team. I think that they go 8 deep, and the Lakers past their top 3. They have some decent role players for sure between Dorian Finney-Smith and Rui Hachimura, and Vanderbilt, I guess, and Hayes. I just like the overall team from the Wolves more, and I think that the Wolves have a better defense and they have more size. All that said, the Lakers have too much offense and too much upside in the top 2, maybe even 3 guys between Luka, LeBron, and I got to throw in Austin Reeves at this point. He's played so great the second half of the season. I think they have a true big 3 offensively, and I do think the Wolves have a chance, but I like the Lakers to win in 6.
Yeah, agree with that one. Well, let's go to some listener questions as we look ahead to the playoffs. The first one here. So Oklahoma City had the best defensive rating in the NBA. And this is an interesting question. Some players said that Oklahoma City won't get those same calls on offense because of the way that the whistle gets swallowed a little bit more. I'm paraphrasing this question here, but the whistle gets swallowed a little bit more in the playoffs. So if that's why Oklahoma City won't win because it won't get to the calls on offense and get to the free throw line, primarily Shea, wouldn't that flip in favor of Oklahoma City on defense because then they can play more aggressively?
That would be the best thing that could happen. It's so funny because you see all these national talking heads saying that, OKC is in for a wake-up call once the playoffs come because they're not going to get the same whistle. The Thunder have one of the worst free throw disparities in the entire league. I think it's the second worst. And they shoot the 4th fewest free throws in the league, despite what the narratives would tell you. So if they're going to let the historically great, elite Thunder defense play more aggressively and swallow the whistle, that favors OKC big time. That could be the best thing that happens to the Thunder in the postseason. That said, look at the playing games. Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry combined for like 89 free throws in that one play-in game, which is supposed to be a playoff atmosphere. So the whole swallowing the whistle narrative about the playoffs tends to not be true either. Like historically, you might be getting like 1 free throw less per, elite superstar player. So it's kind of a false narrative. And if it is somewhat even true, that favors the Thunder.
Well, the next question is about rest and rust. So we haven't seen Shea and at least 3 of the starters play for almost 2 weeks by the time game 1 rolls around. Is there going to be any impact from rust by not playing, by those guys that have not played for weeks?
There may be some, like just, the opening game stuff. But here's the thing. the Thunder are still practicing. They're getting shots up. It's not like they just not, getting on the court at all. So they're going to be staying in a rhythm in their practices, and they're going to have some intense practices warming up to the playoffs. Sure, the Thunder are going to have a lot of time off between, most of the guys missing those last 3 games, or at least the last 2 games, and then another week for the play-ins. But also, the flip side of this, whoever the Thunder play will end up having to play late Friday night in that play-in game, turn around, go on a road game, and play Sunday at noon. So as far as like rust, travel time, prep time, all those things, I think the Thunder will be fine for this matchup. And then like once you're halfway through the first game, I think the rust stuff kind of goes away anyways, and you start to get your rhythm back.
For the next question, I'm going to paraphrase or maybe ask this question in a different way. You hear a lot about playoff experience, and that's one reason why the Thunder can't be expected to advance out, because they don't have the playoff experience. But can you sell why the youth of this team may be an advantage?
Yeah, I would say, the hunger that this team has, and they got a little bit of playoff experience last year. Obviously, they don't have the playoff experience of some of the teams that they're going to face, like, guys like LeBron and Curry and Butler and Jokic and those things. They got a little bit of playoff experience, but they also have that hunger to win it. This team wants to win it, and they have, the legs. I mean, they're going to be playing some older teams in these playoffs. Whether they played, if they were to go to the Western Conference Finals and play the Lakers or the Warriors, even in the second round, possibly playing the Clippers and Harden and Kawhi, the Thunder's youth, their legs are going to be a big advantage over, some of these older teams.
And this is, I think, an interesting question, too, because we know who the top line talent is for the Thunder. What potential non-rotation players or maybe non-starters could be the potential X factor in the playoffs?
I think 2 guys stand out to me as far as non-starters go. I think Alex Caruso, we've seen how he can have a huge impact in just like 20 minutes of playing time in the regular season. But a guy like Alex Caruso is built for the playoffs. The Thunder have kind of kept his minutes down throughout the season to keep him healthy. They were extra cautious with him anytime he was nursing any sort of, bruises, nicks, injuries like that. They wanted him healthy for the playoffs. It's because when the playoffs start, teams are not going to be able to take advantage of any one Thunder defender. And now you're swapping Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso, an elite defense, and a guy that can knock down threes and a guy that can play make and get to the bucket. I think Alex Caruso is going to play a big role, a lot of minutes, and be a huge X factor. And by the way, his shooting dramatically improved as the season went on. We've seen, throughout his career, he's like a 38% 3-point shooter. And we've seen that the second half of the season. But I also think Isaiah Joe, I think his 3-point shooting has been elite since January 1st. He has been great on high volume. He could swing some games just himself by hitting, 4 or 5 or 6 3-pointers, but also providing that gravity and that spacing. I'm cheating here because I also think Cason Wallace you can make an argument for because of his 2-way impact. And I think he continues to be maybe the most underrated player on this Thunder team.
Well, the inverse of that question, and that's the last question that I'm going to ask for myself, is how do you see the rotations playing out in the playoffs? Because the Thunder and Mark would consistently go 10 deep game after game, and he didn't really play his guys super heavy minutes. Are we going to see reduced rotation, 9 guys, 8 guys? And if so, who's the odd man out? Or is it going to be matchup dependent or game dependent? Or do you think Mark's going to stick to what worked during the regular season and still continue to go 10 deep?
I think all of the above are in play with Mark and the Thunder. I think some of it will be matchup dependent, game flow dependent. I do think that Shea, Dub, and Chet are going to play more minutes than they did in the regular season. Like that's going to happen. Your top 3 guys are going to play more. And then there's a second tier of Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, and Isaiah Hartenstein. Those 3 guys are going to get a minutes bump as well. And then there's one more tier, I think, and that tier is Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, and Aaron Wiggins. Now, I expect Cason to continue to get a real role of minutes, and Isaiah Joe, just because Cason's 2-way ability and Isaiah Joe's 3-point shooting. I still think Aaron Wiggins, though, will still play a role. So I think for sure 9 deep. Now, after that, like Jay Will and Kenrich Williams, those guys have been great. And I think those guys are really, really good role players that can help you in any sort of game or series. But if I'm looking at guys like, who might see their minutes go down because other guys' minutes are going up and being maybe game dependent or matchup dependent, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking at like Jay Will and Kenrich Williams. When you need more size in particular matchups, or you need a spark of energy and hustle off the bench, maybe you go to Kenrich or Jay Will. But that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think that's kind of the cutoff. Those 11 will be the guys seeing playing time in the playoffs.
Okay, well, that's a great way to wrap it up. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast. He's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes, because in the playoffs, they're all going to be bangers. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be back in your feed soon.